All right. So if I give you host permissions back now, is it gonna do something weird?
No, it's not.
No, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do that or make it.
Sådan.
Okay. Hello, everybody. We're talking to Veda Austin, and we are really excited because we are going to talk about something that is fundamental to life, and that is water. So, Veda, you are the expert. What's it all about?
Oh my God, that right there is just such a big topic. The question of what is water. Because when we look at water, most people say, well, what is water? And people tell you what they do with it. Water, you drink it, you bathe in it, it washes our waste away. Water is H2O, water is spring water, rainwater, these all the descriptive things. But when you look at an analysis, you're reading all of the things that water holds. But what is water outside of all of those things? And science tells us that, the new science of water at least, tells us that water can store vast amounts of information. So how does water relate to us? How does water relate to consciousness? And how does water relate to memory? I think these are really important questions to start asking. When you're asking the question, what is water? So what I have discovered over the nearly 9 years of researching water is that water doesn't just store information which you can observe through the crystallographic method that I have, which is simply a short-term freezing technique. So, for example, you can project a thought, say a thought of a hand, and you will see an image of a hand appear in the ice. And I'm working macroscopically, so you can see my images with your naked eye. So that suggests that thoughts become things. You're seeing your thoughts crystallized in ice. So they're not random. I have over 32,000 photos of water responding in this intelligent manner. So I've used many, many different types of inspiring influences. I've used different people's faces and seen their specific features appear in the ice. I've spoken to water and got intelligent responses. I've even seen my name in water, in my initials, in exactly the same way that I link them. I have had conversations with water whereby I have got absolutely undeniable responses. And what's so interesting is that if water is responsive, reactive, and communicative, what does that mean? And then I think we need to look at what it is to be a body of water. We are, in fact, bodies of water. Yes, and we're also taught that we're carbon-based, but really we're water-based. By molecular count, we're 99% water. There are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. And yet we don't tend to look at water to understand what it is to be a living, breathing, conscious being. And so when I see responses, for example, I asked water if it could connect to my mum. She died in 1999. She was an absolute angel. And she was my best friend. And so when I lived in Japan, we would write letters to each other. And at the end of every letter, my mother would attempt to draw a circle, which always looks like some strange misshapen roti. And in the middle, she would put a heart. And so when I froze the water, after asking if it could connect to her, I had a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And every year, on her birthday, I get the same response, except it seems like the response is becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. This is one of thousands of different examples of water responding. But then, what is it that is responding?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the thing. It's like when somebody asks you, who are you? We all give our name. No, I don't want to know your name. When somebody asks you, well, who are you? Oh, I'm a carpenter. I'm a water researcher. No, I don't want to know what you do.
Yeah.
Like, you can go through this process of sort of getting to the heart of things, but what are we? The same thing happens with water. And water is in all these different states. We tend to think of water mainly as a fluid because that's how we use it the most, but there is so much water in the air. And personally, I think that the fluid water within us is actually, it doesn't just stop at the physical body. If we are energetic beings, of which of course we are, and we're not fresh water, we're salt water, and that salt has an electrical charge, and our organs also have electrical charges which we can measure. And because there's so much water in the air, I think that the water in the air is attracted to the electrical charge of our body, and that is how we feel energy from the liquid through to the gas state. It's like our body has an energetic web around it, and it's the water responding to energy and other people's energy, where we can feel how someone feels, how it feels inside a room. And so I think that of water, and I say this a lot, that I think that water is the observer. So as human beings, we have the ability to observe ourselves. Like I can observe myself right now as I'm talking.
Yeah.
There are many times in life where we can observe ourselves. Even in dreams, we can observe ourselves in a kind of way. So it's a sort of in-between space. So there is this ability that we have as human beings to be in different states, just like water. Water is in different states. And one of the things that I have found in my work, because I used to completely freeze water, I was very curious in the beginning if water really could store information. And I had been inspired by a number of people. But back then I didn't have a microscope, and all I had was my iPhone, some great water, and a petri dish. So originally I thought, well, I'm going to just project a thought into the water and freeze it, because the secret always seemed to be in the freezing. And as I said, there are different states of water: liquid, solid, gas, and then the type of gel or plasma. That's the kind of water inside of our cells, but you can also find that kind of water inside regular water. And I won't get into all of that. You can follow Dr. Gerald Pollard's work and find that out, that fourth phase of water. But what's really interesting is that when you think about that, the secrets are all in the subtleties. So the subtle layers of freezing and the subtle layers even of liquid, solid, gas, all these different things, they have these subtleties, these layers to them. And because we really know so little about water, there could be quite a number of other states we just haven't identified yet. In fact, really, we know so little about water, we can't even pinpoint exactly where it comes from. There seems to be some question as whether it came from asteroids or meteorites, or whether it came from the ringwoodite held in the Earth's mantle. Either way, both are kind of alien places where humans haven't been, and yet we can't live without it. You know, when you think about it in these terms, it's very interesting, because I'll just quickly finish what I was saying about my technique. So I used to totally freeze water, and my first one was wanting to see if water could store memory. And so I had some water in my petri dish, and as I was thinking about what I was going to think about, I noticed there was a bit of fluff floating around in there. So I put my hand in to take the fluff out, consciously thinking, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote-unquote memory, because I really didn't know for myself if it could do that. So I put it in the freezer with the peas and the broccoli and everything else, and I forgot about it. And a few hours later I came back and I pulled the petri dish out and I held it up to the light and I took a photo on my iPhone. And my first feeling when I first saw it was I was kind of freaked out, because it was clearly a hand that took up half the petri dish, which is actually pretty large. The dish is about this big and the image was this big. So macroscopically that's huge.
Yeah.
And I was really oh my God, how is this even possible? And then I went to the sea. I got some seawater because I thought if any water is going to be informed, it would probably be seawater. And then I did the same thing, and I saw this incredible fish with fins and a perfectly round eye and scales. And then my freezer became my most used household appliance, and I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. But then after a year or so, I started to wonder if I was missing something. Because as you get to understand that in-between stage, the stage between molecular chaos and molecular order, water in a glass is updating its information every trillionth of a second. As it begins to freeze, it comes into more of a molecular crystallographic order, more like a crystal, which is why sometimes it's called liquid crystal. We are liquid crystal because we are salt water, and salt is a crystal. Where in fact we're liquid crystal antennas picking up information from the external world and kind of absorbing it into this internal world. So what's interesting in these different stages, I think, is that when you start to recognize how water creates by using its building blocks of ice, you realize this the stage of creation that's between liquid and solid. And I started to open my freezer earlier and earlier to see what was happening in there. And I observed that the very first thing that happens is that a sheet of ice starts to form. I've captured and photographed that ice has a sort of a light around it, like a little halo. And I think water uses light to be able to design. It's like it has an internal light, much like we do. And so as you start to observe this freezing process, you see that there is a stage which is both liquid and ice. So when you project a thought, there is this saying actually which ties in with this, where I interviewed an indigenous woman and she said she could speak to bees. And she would watch hives, and a bee came out and told her in its own way, we don't mind you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for too long because your consciousness is putting too much light into our hive, and our hive needs to be more dim. Which is very interesting, because if you think that your consciousness puts light into wherever you focus it on, which helps it create, we should very much be mindful of where we put our light, where we focus our consciousness. So when we put consciousness into water, then that is giving water more light to design and to connect. Because the water itself is a light source, I believe. And so what happens is that as the more I saw it, the more I recognized that there's this first freeze that you want to capture. That's the stage where the crystallography adheres to the bottom of the glass petri dish, but there is the liquid on top. So I tip the liquid away and I photograph what's left. It varies with different people's freezers, and I teach my technique so everyone can learn how to do this. But what you'll see is a very clear 3D kind of crystallography, which is completely different really than the original just totally frozen ice. And when you capture that first freeze, because as water freezes, it freezes in layers. So sometimes I show people when I'm teaching the technique what 10 minutes of freezing looks like. It's not solid completely yet. You can put your finger through at least 10 layers of ice. So when you capture the first freeze, you're capturing the first message from water for you. And so it amazes me now that I got as much amazing imagery as I did when I first began this work. So what does it all mean? Well, what I see what it means is that we have not identified ourselves yet as conscious, fluid, intelligent beings of water. Because it seems absolutely impossible still for most people to imagine that something that is not within a body could be intelligent or fluid or conscious or aware. And yet someone once said to me, what if water is actually filling our bodies to express its consciousness through us. So there are many different schools of thought on this, but what I have seen over and over and over again is that water can communicate in ways we have never thought possible before. And as I've said before, the secret is in the subtleties. So even Victor Schauberger, who is one of the great pioneers, and anyone that follows water would know who he is, he had a wonderful experience which he shared about water, where he was watching a river or a stream, and felt something happen to him, and he fell unconscious. And when he came conscious again, he realized that, and he wrote it, that water had taken his free consciousness away with it and brought it back to him, filled with information about what it liked, what kind of temperature it liked, how it liked to move, the sum of its secrets. And he said that he was a searcher, that he became a researcher, sending his free consciousness out on these expeditions with water. And so you start to look into people that have had really incredible experiences with water, and you start to realize there is the potential that it is water and all its different states that is actually the conscious expression of life. And I say this observer, and I say we can observe ourselves and we can be in dreams and all of these things, but I've interviewed various people who have had near-death experiences. And one of the things they say is very much in alignment with what I've seen. So I keep seeing twos of things. 2 types of water in water, informed and uninformed water. 2 types of water in egg albumin, because I've done a study on egg albumin, which was really interesting. The gelatinous gloopy part, and then a type that's more like saliva. And it kind of keeps going on. Even the word in Maori from my culture in New Zealand for spirit is wairua, which means 2 waters. And so there is this idea that perhaps we have a kind of drop of consciousness within us that is our conscious expression, that is always with us. And then upon death, that drop transmutes from potentially a fluid, I don't know if it's a fluid or a gas in the body, into a vibrational gas of which we just haven't been able to see yet with our technology, but maybe we could. And then as a gas expands, it cools, which is why people say that spirit feels cold. But what happens next when you speak to people that have had near-death experiences is that they say they leave their body, they feel this rising. 3 of them said, they looked down and said, oh, I hope that person's going to be okay. They became the observer, which is in complete alignment with what I've been saying, because an observer is not in judgment. You see, I don't get any of this imagery in water if I am in a state of frustration. If I'm silly enough to think that I've had a really bad day, the children have been driving me crazy, I've been stuck in traffic for 3 hours or something, come back and go, oh, I'm going to do some crystallography for somebody, it's never a good idea, because that energy of frustration or even expectation, water will not play with me. Water shows me all about love. Because this is why I don't say I experiment on water, because I am a body of water that doesn't want to be experimented on, and what I see in water is that it's responsive. If I think I'm experimenting on water, that's no different than me saying I'm going to experiment on my children. For me, it's such a sacred source. I think of water not as a resource, but source itself. And so when I think about this, I'm forming relationship. And so when I say to people who ask me, well, how do I form relationship with water? I mean, we've been doing it our whole lives. We form relationship through water, through breast milk, through water, through our loving relationships with other people. We're bodies of water having relationships with other bodies of water, our pets, our nature as well. That's the thing about water, is it's the connecting force of all life. And so by not looking at water, when you're looking at life, is sort of missing a great big massive point, is that fluid conscious expression can be seen both in the body and outside of the body. Every glass of water that you drink has been through the trees, it's been through the cows and the sheep and the aquifers, it's been through our ancestors, and it's about to enter you. And I've done studies even on saliva where the last word that you've spoken is still resonating in your mouth. When you drink water, that is the first thing it's coming into contact with. Be mindful of what you say. Because even in, for example, I did a test where the last word I said was 8, the number 8. And as unladylike as it might appear, I spat into the dish and I froze it. And there was like the number 8 almost stamped in one of the saliva bubbles. And so when you recognize how powerful our thoughts and our words are, and how water is so responsive to that, we start to realize actually how powerful we are, and not the kind of power which is about overpowering people, but the power to turn lights on in people. And so I
can see your head explode.
It just connects so many dots for me.
So
It's
many
like,
answers.
it's like you're saying the eyes, like it has this light, and we know that when a sperm and an egg comes together, the creation of life, there's a flash of light. You talk about this gooey liquid state and how we are what in Chinese medicine is called the meridians, is pathways that follow along the fascia. And when you do like fresh tissue work, like on people who just died, the fascia is that it's this liquid crystal, and the electricity can't pass through the fascia, but runs alongside the fascia along those pathways. That not just the Chinese, because we found out it's been everywhere. It's just that it's only in China it's been kept, this knowledge. But that's where the electricity runs along. And oh my God, there's so many other things.
I want to say something too.
Yeah, sorry. This is so mind-blowing. Normally we have more of a conversation, but this is just like
it's so many questions and so many answers. I just get so many downloads now. It's things click into place. It's mind-blowing. I love it. So right now they're putting 5G towers on all the water supply thingies, the water towers and everything.
Everywhere. That's where they put the 5G masts.
Yeah, to infect or inform the water that we're drinking. But when I talk to you right now, I'm like, that doesn't matter, because I can influence my water right here. I can change that because I'm that powerful, you know. And it's kind of scary and at the same time, because we've been told that if you're saying you're powerful, you're not a good person, right? Because that's what we've been told for so many years. But embracing that and using it for good and for healing powers. Yeah, now I'm thinking about all the sacred and healing springs that's been talked about all over the world, where people came and drank the water and they healed spontaneously. And yeah,
but that also comes to this whole thing with with the abuse, like, because we have very much experienced like how our whole systems are built up on trauma and mutual abuse of each other. And there's so many things in our wording, in our language, is the tooling of things like, this is a tool for this is what we use this for, instead of having a communion, or we come into on a level playing field with whatever it is. Like in this case, with the very foundations of life, that we come into a
Yeah.
level with it, level water.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. And when we
Holy,
and when we
holy.
think about another person, we send thoughts.
Information towards that.
Yeah,
That's
and
how you can communicate all the way across the world, because
And-
we think about the thoughts that when you send a conscious thought to another person across the world, and they can literally, then they phone you. That happens a lot. You know, you think of someone and then all of a sudden they phone you. How do they pick up that information? The water in the air can travel so far, and we forget that about this water that is literally around us, and we're within right now. We can communicate to our loved ones in other realms. We can communicate to people across the world. But most importantly, we need to remember that we can communicate to ourselves, through ourselves as well. And that is something I think that we're always being taught that the answers are out there. And the answers are really in here.
Yeah.
And they're right in front of us. And we are, one of the things that I've observed is that, especially in this world right now, there is a lot of fear. People don't know who they can trust. They don't know what's going on. And so there's a lot of talk about this collective fear and these things. And of course that's all there. But what I've also observed is that we live in two worlds, the world we live on and the world we live in. And do we actually ever experience anything outside of this body? Ever? Because everything we hear is coming into the body, everything we see is coming through the lenses, everything that we taste is coming into the body, everything we touch, we feel through our fingers, everything is felt within this body and within this realm. And so understanding that we actually have the ability through our conscious awareness is to talk to ourselves, to talk to these cells. You know, in every cell there is this highly ordered, structured water called fourth phase water. It is like a battery, but it also absorbs and shares information. We can talk to every single, all these trillions of cells in our body, and actually heal ourselves. One of the things that I've seen, like tap water for example, I tend to identify it as someone who's not well, because tap water has been through trauma. Tap water has gone through a lot of right angles, which is not natural for water. It's got a lot of toxins in it. I have a lot of compassion for tap water. So when you look at tap water crystallographically, it doesn't form in shapes or patterns that have any particular order, compared to spring water, which forms hexagons and flowers and ferns and things like this. But you can take that tap water and use it as your control, and you can put it into a singing bowl and play it, and then take that water, use my technique, and see that these ferns will start to appear. These flowers will start to appear. So it is structurally changed, although it hasn't chemically changed. But who knows? Maybe if you kept doing that, then it might even start to make a difference chemically. But a change is still profound.
Yeah.
We can't ignore that there is a change. So if somebody is sick and they still have the ability, so I call that the energetic state of water. We also have an energetic state, an emotional state of health. So we could be sick, but we still have a choice to be happy or sad. So if somebody comes to us and we've been told by a doctor that we have some disease, then that person is going to come and hug us and say something lovely to us that really melts our heart and makes us feel good. There will be a structural change that happens within us, even though the doctors might say you're still going to have that disease. But that structural change is enough. If that keeps happening, if you keep feeling happier, that is going to help you to keep making changes, making waves, so that next wave is going to flood you. We really are oceans full of information, and we're memory-making bodies. We began this conversation a while ago now, and that's a memory. When we look about our whole life, everything about what it is to be however we identify ourselves to be, is a memory. Water is storing these memories in us, and I think when we leave this vessel of this body, it then is able to be released from the fear of losing that body, and it becomes more of the observer without any fear, and it sees things, we see things in an entirely different way. But if we understand that we are that observer spirit, and when we feel we're triggered and we have all those human emotions that come up, one of the most incredible tools we have is to observe ourselves as we go through that. Because as you're observing, you're not judging, you're observing, and you go, I wonder when the first time I felt like that was. I wonder why I'm feeling like this. You go into curiosity as opposed to judgment. We are so incredibly sophisticated that, you know, I've seen you can use modalities like singing bowls and vortexing machines and to restructure water. But water responds even better just to conscious expression. You can take, for example, there's some water in this bottle, and imagine that this was tap water, which I know its structural identity. But you can take it and just hold it to your heart like you would a child that will hear your heartbeat and will feel your energy field. And that on its own can restructure it and give it beautiful hexagonal patterns. Sometimes it will form in what I term as hydroglyphs, which are a symbolic language of water, which I've identified, and it will form hearts. And so the hydroglyphs, which I'll touch on briefly, although they've been 4 years of my nearly 9 years study of work, that I started to see repeated patterns showing up in crystallography when I used certain words. For example, I can write the word creation and place my petri dish of water on top of it, freeze it, and I will have what I term as the emanating seed. It's like these two little seeds in the ice with these incredible waves all the way around it. The whole dish is actually the symbol. And then I've done that well over 50 times. In my Hydroglyphs PDF, I have over 64 examples of many of these glyphs showing that they're not random. But what's interesting is that they seem to hold messages or as these words, and they are layered. And so starting to identify the layers of meaning, they're very much similar to hieroglyphs, in that they're not meant to be spoken, but they're meant to be felt. And the New Age hieroglyphs are emojis. So when we get a message, someone says, you know, meet me at so-and-so at the shop and blah, 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 at this time, and at the end there'll be like a heart and a kissy face.
Yeah.
When we see the heart and the kissy face, we read it,
Yeah.
but in a different way.
Yeah.
So this symbolic ice language that I'm seeing takes what we understand about water to an entirely another level. It's taken me 4 years. I've only found 35 glyphs so far. But the language in which, when I say to water, what is a hydroglyph, I get two hydroglyphs to explain something so complex. The hydroglyph for living and the hydroglyph for message. Hydroglyphs are living messages.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother realm.
Yeah.
But
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you just saw, head on over to whoselifeisitsummit.com/podcast, where you can find full-length episodes as well as in audio format, and we do a lot of other cool stuff. You can hang out with us and other like-minded individuals who want to create a world that works for everyone, and we do that on our platform where we can chat, and we have Q&As and exclusive interviews as well. So there's so much to get over there. So come on over and play with us.